Erev Yom Tif. If you come to Shul on Yom Tif, the Chag, the holiday, especially with the lofty goal in mind of saying the Yizkor prayers, you probably don't want to get into a conversation about politics. Fair enough. The peace and joy of the holiday probably are not a very good mix with politics. And yet, maybe it's an appropriate time, just at that moment of calm and tranquility, to take a step back from the moment to moment anxiety of politics and think about the larger picture. There are a lot of challenges, and one of the most persistent is the character of religion and state in any nation, whether it be Canada with its mosaic of faiths, which has lately felt not so comfortable for those of us of the Mosaic faith, or our neighbor to the south, whose wall between church and state has been eroding of late, or even of the United Kingdom, where the sovereign who visited us this past week is supposed to be the defender of the faith, but has said that he's more comfortable styling himself as the defender of faiths, plural. Or, of course, Israel. Is it a Jewish state, state of the Jews, or none of the above? As it turns out, this is not at all a new question. Nothing new under the sun. Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory took up this very question in an essay for Shavuot a few years back when he was still chief rabbi. He noted that Shavuot itself has several layers of mystery about it. What exactly does it commemorate? Which ultimately is the first harvest in Israel, and by association, the giving of the Torah, as our prayers mention. Secondly, the date, which, as it turns out, we ourselves fix the date by counting the Omer, 49 days, 7 complete weeks. And thirdly, when is that count supposed to begin? Which led to, or was a symptom of, a great division in the Jewish people in the times of the Second Temple. It may come as a shock, but in those days, a few thousand years ago, the Jewish people were not united. We were actually quite divided among different factions and classes and parties with different outlooks on what it meant to be Jewish and what that should mean for the Jewish society and everyone in it. We had these various factions and groups like Asiyim or Essenes, who were a very small group that practiced an extreme kind of ascetic piety that went far beyond the Torah, what the Torah asks of us. Some even discouraged marriage and having children, which sounds like a good idea if you want to save on day school tuition, but it's kind of hard to perpetuate a culture if nobody has any children. The Essenes left us a record of their culture and teachings with the Dead Sea Scrolls, which continue to fascinate scholars. There was another political party or influential social group called the Tzedukim, or the Sadducees, who did not believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh. They didn't hold of the texts and traditions that eventually became the Mishnah, the Talmud, and the great body of rabbinic commentary. The Tzdukim were landowners and were, in Rabbi Sachs's explanation, believers in national institutions, the priesthood, which they sort of bought and sold. You see, back in ancient times, before we were as smart as we are today, politics and religion were very much corrupted by money and power. Interesting footnote of history. Tzaddukim, the Sadducees, felt that the oral law, the Mishnah, and eventually the Talmud was for exile, for remembering things when you're in Babylon. Once we returned to Israel, we could focus on the land, the state, and the government. It was biblically ordained and therefore much more important. And then there were a group called the Porushim, which means the separate ones. The English translation of that group is called the Pharisees, which has a terrible connotation in English of people who blindly obey the law without thinking of the heart or soul. It actually happens to be us, believers in rabbinic Judaism. We are the Pharisees. We called ourselves not that in those days. We called ourselves the Chaverim, the Chaverim, the Chevra, the crew, the gang, the peeps. Not always so slavish, not always so obedient, and here we are. So Rabbi Sachs explains that the famous argument over when to start counting the Omer, whether it should be the first day of Chol HaMoed Pesach, which is what we do to this day, or rather should it be the first Sunday after Pesach, which the Torah seems to say, but we believe it doesn't mean that. If we start counting on Sunday, which would make Shavuot always into a long weekend, that was a great gift to the Tzedukim's constituents, the landowners, and the people who worked the farms and would be delighted with a 3-day weekend. Who doesn't like that? And the bigger issue at stake, that this conflict emerged from was, should the Jewish nation be based on national institutions, meaning the state, the government, the hierarchy of the priesthood, and all the trappings of a nation state? Or rather, should the Jewish people be based on what the Parushim, those pesky Pharisees, believed was important? Schools, yeshivas, shuls, coming together to pray, teaching our children, learning, the family, the home. Rabbi Sachs cites an in-depth treatment of this question by Professor Daniel Elazar, the late great professor of political science from Bar Ilan. The thesis is that this debate over whether Judaism is centered on political institutions or family and community settings obviously never went away. It just went into hibernation until it awoke in the late 1800s, and here we are. Harav Sachs says clearly that neither side was exclusionist. Everyone believed Torah was important. Everyone believed the land of Israel was important. It was a question of who had first dibs, who had the upper hand, or the primary focus of the nation-building efforts. You can find this fascinating discussion on Rabbi Sachs's website under Shavuos, and it's worth reading and deciding for yourself how much to apply to our days. It really is an age of extremes, and there are some in our day who might say only the land, and similarly others who might say only the Torah, to the exclusion of having any kind of balance. However we got here, how do we get away from extremism and narrow-mindedness? Maybe one good answer is Yizkor. Not all of us will say Yizkor this coming Yom Tov. Those who are fortunate enough to have both parents still in this world often have the custom to step outside. But all of us can reflect on the essential, profound Jewish values that Yizkor expresses 4 times a year. We are not the first ones here, and we are not the last. We are stewards. We are caretakers. Hopefully, we will leave things a little better than when we found them. We are all here as a product or result, somehow or other, of those who came before us. As we often say, some of our ancestors would take deep comfort and satisfaction and pride in knowing that we are in Shul on Shavuos saying Yizkor. Others of our ancestors might be quite surprised to find us here. No matter what the case is with that, we are acknowledging that in some way or other, what they did resulted in us being here on this day. And we look forward when we make a pledge of tzedakah, and more so Tuesday night or Wednesday, when we go on the shul website and we pay the pledge. We say we recognize that there will be others after us, and we have an obligation to pay it forward, to do our part now and going forward to make things better in some measure, no matter what the amount we give. As long as we feel we are fulfilling those verses we read at the end of our Torah portion, each according to the blessing that God, your God, has given you. Just to add a brief word of thanks to our wonderful Torah Tours volunteers who will join us for the holiday. We're very grateful for them joining us. We especially appreciate that Shavuot this year is after the end of the academic year. So they're not just taking off time from studying to be here, they're actually giving up some of their summer vacation. So thanks very much to the Chevra. We are really appreciative that they join us. Have a Chag Sameach. We wish each other Kabbalat HaTorah, Simcha Ubepnimiyut. May we experience receiving the Torah on this Shavuot holiday with great joy and in an inward, meaningful way. Chag Sameach.